When learning a new skill, one of the biggest traps that you can fall into is letting the negative voice inside your head dictate where you go. In this video, we're going to directly address that voice. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Verbal to Visual. I'm your host, Doug Neill. The skill we talk about on this channel is called sketchnoting, giving a visual form to the ideas that you work with. And especially with a visual medium like sketchnoting, it's almost inevitable that at some point in the process, your inner critic is going to get pretty loud. But you don't have to give that inner critic control. And today I'm going to share two specific strategies that I think will help with that. Let's sketch it out. First, let me set the stage here and describe what I think the sketchnoter's inner critic most often sounds like. What we do as sketchnoters, as visual note takers, is take the information that we're reading in books or listening to in podcasts or hearing at live events, and we map those ideas out. Sometimes with stick figures and other drawings, other times using containers like clouds and boxes, connecting them with lines to show how those ideas are related to each other. But no matter the specific format that your sketch notes take, the same types of negative thoughts tend to come up. Thoughts like, this doesn't look good enough, or maybe I'm not capturing enough. And it's easy for those specific negative thoughts to generalize to things like, I'm bad at this, and I should just quit. And the first thing that I want to emphasize here is that these thoughts are common. Not too long ago within Verbal to Visual, I posted a poll asking the question, how often does your inner critic crop up while sketchnoting? For most sketchnoters, it's often. So know that you're not the only person that experiences those negative thoughts. Even though I've been doing this for a decade now, they still crop up for me too. And the first step in overcoming thoughts like these is first to simply acknowledge them. Don't feel like you have to try to block these out completely. That strategy likely won't work. Here I like what Elizabeth Gilbert has to say about fear on the creative journey. It gets a seat, it gets a voice, but it doesn't get a vote. It doesn't get to decide where you go next. So that brings up the question, what do you do with these thoughts? And how do you decide where to go next? The first thing that I try to do in those situations when my inner critic is cropping up is to shift my perspective. And that's what I encourage you to do as well. When you're initially working on a new sketch note, it's easy to stay stuck in this close-up view of it. And from that perspective, the thing that might stand out to you most is the aesthetic quality of it. How it looks, and it might not look as good as you want it to. So from that position, it's easy to get stuck paying attention only to the aesthetic goals that you might have for your notes. But those goals are often not the most important, if they're important at all, which is why I encourage you to literally or figuratively take a step back, zoom out a bit, and ask yourself, why are you taking these notes in the first place? Remind yourself of the purpose for reading that book, or listening to that podcast, or going to that event. When you do that zooming out and connecting with your initial purpose, you might realize, hey, I actually met a bunch of the learning goals that I had. These visual notes, even if they don't look as good as I'd like them to look, they help me to learn this new thing. Or if you're trying to wrap your head around a complex situation that you're dealing with at work or in your personal life, maybe that messy map of ideas actually helped you to better identify the problem and some potential solutions. That's a meaningful and what I would call successful outcome. And if even at this zoomed out perspective, those negative thoughts are still cropping up, you might try to get an outside opinion. Ask someone you trust to come take a look. Let them know what you're working on and get their feedback on it. That outside opinion might help you break free from that negative loop that might be going on inside your head. Another technique for shifting your perspective was suggested by Kathleen Murphy in response to that poll that I posted. She said, I think it has been helpful for me to ask myself, what is one thing I like about my work? Surely I find at least one thing I like about any sketch. A follow-up to this question is, what is one thing I would change next time? I am not focusing on the negative, but what I can improve upon. By limiting to one thing, it's actually constructive. What I like about that approach is that it forces you to look at the good without ignoring the things that you don't like about the sketchnote. You still get to choose one thing that you might do differently next time, while also recognizing one thing that went well this time. This perspective shift is really just step one in the process. The next step is to do something with that new perspective, to build some momentum. The most annoying thing about your inner critic is that it probably has lots to say. So if you keep listening to it, it won't take long to become surrounded and to feel paralyzed. That paralysis of overthinking is what we want to avoid here. Shifting your perspective is how you create a little bit of space amongst all those thoughts. But then once you've got that window, you've got to take some action, because it's in the taking of a few steps away from those thoughts that you're most likely to find clarity. That clarity won't come from continuing to sit and do nothing besides regurgitating those negative thoughts. So my encouragement here is to identify one single action that you can take, and then take it. That action might be picking one idea from your original sketch note and redrawing it. Pick just one thing to improve about it and make that improvement. It could also mean stepping away from that sketch note entirely and digging into the next chapter in your book or the next podcast episode. Let new ideas capture your attention. This idea of maintaining momentum is important for Kirsten Pollock as well, who said, "I have to be quick to avoid my inner critic. When I have an idea that I like and I'm in a sort of creative flow and all seems very playful, I have to finish my drawings quickly and do something with them. Send them to a friend, pin them to my pin board, or show them to a colleague before my inner critic has the occasion to come to life. When I stop drawing and begin to think about it, there's a big danger that the critical thoughts become too powerful. And then I often stop the drawing and the idea doesn't really come to life, but remains a ghost somewhere in a sketchbook." I love those ideas of continuing to draw to stay ahead of your inner critic, and then doing something with your notes as soon as possible. I think of sketchnoting as this tool to help bridge the gap between ideas and action. The things that you're learning about, that you're taking visual notes on, some of them might just be for your own enjoyment, new knowledge that you'd like to have stored in your brain, but most of the time it's because you want to apply those ideas in some way in your professional or personal life. So don't forget that that's the whole point. It's not to create a pretty picture, it's to broaden your worldview and to inform the actions that you take, which is why I think defaulting to some sort of action is a great way to keep your inner critic at bay, to keep it from paralyzing you. By the way, I think this process here works beyond the world of sketchnoting, whenever your inner critic comes up. As human beings, I think negative thoughts like these are unavoidable. But these two steps of first shifting your perspective and then building some momentum, I think you'll find them to be useful. If you have other examples of how your inner critic crops up while sketchnoting, or specific solutions for dealing with that inner critic, please do drop them in a comment below. And if you'd like an outside perspective on whatever it is you're working on, come join us inside of Verbal to Visual. In addition to posting polls like the one I shared, that is also a place for you to share your sketch notes at any stage in your process. Both the learning process, if you're new in your sketchnoting journey, but also in the middle of any specific sketchnoting work. Maybe you get halfway through and you're not sure where to go next. That'd be a great time to share your work and get feedback from me and other members of the Verbal to Visual community. In there you will also find a full library of sketchnoting courses and regular live workshops to help you continue building your skills. You can learn more and sign up at verbaltovisual.com. Thank you so much for watching. I hope the ideas that I shared here help to keep your inner critic from dominating the conversation, and I look forward to sharing more ideas with you next time. Till then.